So now it's the this is the discussion section of the day of meditation on the 27th of the 3rd, 2021, and a question came up about the instructions in the morning, and this is how it goes. I'm used to doing insight practice. What do I do when sounds or other phenomena arise? I am shifting attention to nostrils rather than the rising and falling. So when penetrating or sinking into the object, do I ignore the specific characteristics such as warmth, coolness, or the quality of movement? So I just clarify something. There's a difference between when we're doing insight meditation, a pure insight meditation practice, and a pure serenity practice. A serenity practice, the way I describe, inclining towards the cultivation of jhanas. One thing about the difference is that with insight, we use those first three factors of the 7 factors of awakening: mindfulness, investigation, and energy. We use them, they're clearly related to insight practice. The next 3 factors of the 7 factors of awakening are joy, tranquility, concentration. And the last factor of the 7 qualities, the 7 factors of awakening, is equanimity. We can arrive at equanimity using mindfulness, investigation, and energy, or we could arrive at equanimity using joy, tranquility, and concentration. And equanimity is the culmination of all of the 6 previous factors. So what I'm pointing out is that there is a difference with what's dominant in the ingredients or the factors of insight and serenity. With the insight meditation, the emphasis is on inquiry. There's also a greater emphasis on mindfulness, even mindfulness as a practice, where we track along with experience. And we're discerning the experience, we're inquiring into the experience. So there's mindfulness and the investigation. And there's a lot of effort and energy. The effort is about looking in to the characteristics of the experience. And in this case, the characteristics of existence being impermanence, not self, and the dukkha nature of this experience. So they're features of insight meditation. Another feature of insight meditation is the object can change, because what we're looking at is the characteristics. We're also looking at cause-effect relationships, what leads to what, for example. So this is insight meditation practice. We could be sitting down for a practice of insight meditation practice, and we could shift between body, feelings, heart, mind, or consciousness and phenomena all in one sitting. You know, it could be like, we can use that like changing gears on a car. You know, we're in first gear for a while, and then it, depending on the circumstances, we might shift to second gear. The objects also may change. Like we could start with being mindful of our breath, say at the abdomen, and then not too long into it, we start to have thoughts about something, so we could be mindful of thinking. Then we might have an emotion arise, we could be mindful of the emotion, and so on and so forth. The objects change. This is with insight. So all those are characteristics of insight, and there's a kind of spectrum between insight meditation and serenity meditation. There's a saying, you pick up one end of the stick, the other end of the stick will follow. So if you think of serenity and insight as ends of a spectrum, ends of a stick. And so there's at the insight end of the spectrum, mindfulness and investigation is strong. At the serenity end of the spectrum, concentration or samadhi and absorption is strong. But they have this gradient in between where there might be some mindfulness, but towards the serenity end, there's still mindfulness, but concentration is powerful. There's still mindfulness enough to keep us on track. So serenity, the characteristics of serenity meditation is that it is exclusive. mindfulness, insight is inclusive. We're paying attention to many things, and we're including a kind of an interest and an inquiry into the nature of experience. At the serenity end of the spectrum, however, we're excluding things. It's not inclusive, we're excluding things. We're narrowing our attention in on one thing. We're putting other things aside. We're not getting rid of other things, we're just letting our attention focus in on one thing. So if you're asking about, I think the next question is what do I do when sounds and other phenomena arise? They just arise. They let them arise in the background of your awareness, but you're not attending to them. You're attending to the object that you've chosen on. With insight meditation, you might switch between mindfulness of breath. If you hear a sound, you might go to hearing, then come back to mindfulness of breath, for example. But with serenity meditation, you choose mindfulness of breath and you just focus in on that. And in terms of, with serenity practice, it's exclusive, it's about absorption, it's about one thing rather than multiple objects, and it's about, the quality of inquiry is not strong. There's a level of interest, like you're interested in how the sensations at the nose tip might feel, but it's not as strong as your discernment and inquiry that you have with insight meditation. There's an interest, and that keeps you honed in on it. There's mindfulness, but the mindfulness is about remembering to be attentive to this object. When your mind slips off, come back. So what we do when we have distractions, well, first of all, insight meditation has no such thing as distractions. Serenity meditation has distractions. But it is the distractions are what grab our attention. So if a sound arises, we let that sound arise in the background of our awareness, and our awareness is broad and wide, but it doesn't detract from the object of our attention. There's a difference between attention and awareness. Awareness is sort of in the background. It's general. It's being aware of things happening around you, but it's not focusing on anything. It's not discerning about anything in the background, unless it becomes important. Like say if you're sitting and meditating and suddenly a semi-trailer starts driving towards your room, and in the background of your awareness you can see the semi-trailer driving your room. It's important to get up and get out of there. So that's the sort of thing, that's the role of awareness. And similarly, if you want to just talk about the hindrances, you'll be sitting meditating, and in the background, your background awareness might pick up some cues that there's a hindrance happening. You might be starting to think about how much you don't like someone, or worrying about something or something. And their awareness provides a really important function because it alerts you to that, so it doesn't, before it starts to take hold and take over your meditation. So coming back to what you do with other phenomena, it's sort of excluding things. Like when we do mindfulness of breath at the nose tip, for example, there's change in temperature, there's sensations, there's physical sensations, there's sounds maybe, there's all sorts of experiencing happening, but we hone in on just one aspect of that experience. When I do mindfulness of breath, it begins with what's called a sign of the breath. You're just aware that you're breathing in and out your nose. You might even have a picture of your air coming in and out of your nose, for example. Then the next nimitta, or next sign, is sensations. It just becomes sensations. Now, for me, in my practice, inside practice, I would have been discerning about all the other things like warmth and temperature and sound and even smell, perhaps. But with a serenity practice, I'm just honing in on one aspect. That's the physical sensations. I'm honing in on that, and I've got interest in it, but I'm not investigating into it. I'm just absorbing into it. So that's a response to that question. I hope it's useful. And And the next part of it, finally, and this looks like 3 questions, maybe it is, I'm not sure. When doing walking meditation, I fall into lifting, moving, placing mode. How should it actually be practiced? Okay, so there's another question now. I'll see if that's a question later on. And I will refer to this by referring to a very dear friend, mentor and teacher of mine called John Hale, who when I was doing a practice at his place one time, like in about 1987 or 1986, I was there for a couple of weeks, and I was doing walking meditation, and I remember seeing John at a previous retreat, with U Pandita. When I was out doing my walking meditation, I'd see him late at night up in his room. You could see him walking back because you see the windows on the room, and he was just walking backwards and forwards really, really mindfully, really slowly. It was just beautiful. I watched it for a bit, and I thought I'd better get back to my own practice. I just watched him. It was like watching something really quite beautiful and serene, just walking backwards and forwards. So I asked him about, what do you do when you do walking meditation, John? In one of our interviews. And he said, I just get into it. I just kind of get into it, get into the flow of it. I just kind of walking backwards and forwards. So with walking meditation, we can do it in an insight way or a serenity way. Actually, before I say that, I want to say that John was a master of insight meditation, and I think he was a master at that because his concentration was so good. One of the reasons was his concentration was so good. You talk about the jhana practices with him, that was no problem. He could do those. And I remember I got interested in developing concentration because I realized that I needed to develop concentration to penetrate phenomena. John didn't need to get into the jhana practice because he could master them easily. He preferred to use his concentration and just practice insight. Nonetheless, when he's doing his meditation, he's already got it. He's got the concentration. He's got that samadhi. So technically the difference between using walking as a serenity practice and an insight practice is that with an insight practice, we're discerning the differences between the sensations. We're inquiring into them. We're feeling hardness, softness, lifting. We're feeling movement. We're feeling stickiness. We're feeling the elements and so on. We're also looking at our intention. Every time we make a step, we can note the intention to lift, the intention to move, the intention to place. Or as Sadhu Janika mentioned to me, that's too much. Just do it at the beginning and the end of each turn, intending to walk. That's enough, because I was getting too, retreat I was with him, I was getting too caught up in noting every intention for every slight movement. So there's a strength of inquiry with walking meditation as an insight practice. As a serenity practice, we're not doing so much inquiry. We're just kind of getting into the flow. We're just kind of getting into the groove, and we're enjoying it. We feel the relaxation, and we're just focusing on the act of moving, and we're kind of getting into the flow, just like John was talking about in terms of getting into the flow of it. And in fact, that then supports insight. And just before I finish, and I hope you don't mind me going on for so long, but I think these are really interesting questions, and it's good to discern these because they serve us in our practice. When we do a serenity practice and we're just getting into absorbing in the quality, we can't help but have insight into the experience. Especially if we've got a background of insight meditation, it's just happening. We're knowing this is impermanent. We're knowing this is not self. We're knowing this is, we can't cling to things, otherwise they'll give us a lot of suffering. We're knowing the dukkha nature of this experience. it sort of goes along with the territory. You can't really definitely divide serenity and insight. It's more of this experience of being on a gradient. So some practices, like Alan Wallace talked about, a particular practice called settling the mind in its natural state, which is about a serenity practice focusing on thoughts. So we just absorb in the contents of our mind. And the way Alan described it, he said, it's a serenity practice or a shamatha practice. He described it as a shamatha practice, but it is at the cusp of insight. So if that makes sense, it's like and having practiced that meditation many times, you know, it's absorbing into the experience of just being with mental phenomena, and insights arise. They just sort of come up. One's getting a lot of insight arising. So I hope that's answered that question.